Welcome to yet another Sad Boys book review. My name is Dusty, and today I am covering The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson, Book 2 in the Mistborn trilogy. So, if you haven't listened to my Sad Boys book review of Mistborn: The Final Empire, which I released, I think, back in January of 2024, highly recommend you checking that one out before listening to this one, because this will continue off of that one. However, like normal, this will be as spoiler-free as I can make it. But with that in mind, Book 2 of Mistborn. So I kind of went into this one. I looked at a couple of reviews before reading it, just to kind of see what the general community opinion was on this one, as spoiler free as I could as well. Thankfully, I was pretty successful in that, and it seemed like a lot of people felt like this one suffered from middle book syndrome, where people see it as mostly just a setup for the final book in the trilogy, and that it suffered because of that. And people found most of it boring, and only really like the last 100 pages or so, where you get your classic Sanderson climax, your Sanderlanche, if you will. And that's when the book became really good. But before that, it just kind of was a mixed bag. So I was a little concerned going into it that I wouldn't like it near as much as The Final Empire, which, if I remember correctly, I don't remember if I gave it a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10. I don't remember. So yeah, I was a little concerned going into it, and thankfully my personal fears were assuaged pretty quickly, because I do feel like The Well of Ascension starts off stronger than The Final Empire did. If you forced me, gun to my head, which one is the better book overall, in my opinion, I think I might give The Final Empire a slight edge over The Well of Ascension, but I really did love this book from start to finish. If anybody has listened to any of these, they will know that I am a sucker for very good political intrigue in my fiction, and this book is almost entirely politics of the aftermath of the Final Empire. So there's a lot of questions that need to be answered from the end of that book and where the world kind of sits. So because of that, our characters are in a different situation than they found themselves in by the end of the Final Empire, and because of that, they have to now adapt and deal with the new situations that arise. It kind of puts them in a lot of unfamiliar spots that requires essentially new character developments from already established characters. And I think that one of the better things that Sanderson did in this book was enrich his already established characters and create a little more nuance to them, which is not always the easiest thing to do when you already have an established character. When you have these changes occur that force characters to become different than how they were already established in a previous book, you risk creating I think the appropriate term would be flanderizations of these characters, to where they become caricatures, exaggerations, or just a whole different character entirely than what you've already established them to, and that can set a lot of readers off of this book and these characters because of those very drastic changes. And I don't think that's something that this book falls into. Everybody acted in a way that I felt was completely natural to their character as it was established in the first book, and there was never a point in time where I was like, oh, so-and-so would have never done this in this situation. There were plenty of times where characters do something, and I'm like, oh, come on, dude, you shouldn't have done that. What are you doing? But, it's not me complaining about how the character wouldn't have done that. It's how I wish the character didn't do that, but it's still within the bounds of, I believed that they would have made that decision, if that makes sense. So yeah, everybody definitely acted like an extension of the characters that I assumed that they would be. So once again, great job with character writing by Brandon Sanderson. It's definitely one of the things he does that I feel he does best. I know some people may not agree with that. I know Sanderson has a lot of, almost as many critics as he does fans. And obviously one of his biggest pulls are his magic systems, but I do feel like his character writing, at least in my opinion, is very, very good, and I enjoy listening to his characters live and breathe and interact with each other in these worlds that he creates. So yeah, really loved the plot. Everything felt like a natural progression from the Final Empire. The conflict, I definitely didn't expect it. I didn't expect it to be. I don't want to say narrow, because I feel like that does not give credit to what the actual conflict of the book is, but I expected it to be a little more broad than what we got. But that narrow focus that the plot does stick to for a majority of its time does a great job of establishing these character situations and motivations that create for them. And so with a new book, there also are new characters, and while I am kind of hit or miss on the new characters themselves, it's not due to a lack of quality. It's just due to a lack of interest in that character as they're presented. I think they're all well-written characters, but, not every character is going to be for everybody. Everyone's going to have their favorite characters and their least favorite characters, and that's just natural. And some of the new characters I thought were great and did a great job of fitting into the story and doing what they needed to do, and others I thought still fit in the story and did what they needed to do, but I just wasn't really thrilled every time they came onto the page. I'm like, oh, here comes this person. All right, let's see what they're gonna do now. So, yeah, it's a balancing act, and I do think it was overall successful. So, credit to Brandon Sanderson for that. But also on that note, there's an expansion of the magic system, Allomancy and Furukami, for the Keepers. We get a little more information on how these magic systems work, since there is now more room to expand on them and go into more details of what they can and can't do. And without going too deep into it, there is an expansion of power that does feel very natural, especially given the situation of how the powers were limited in the Final Empire due to the situation that the Lord Ruler created. It's nice to see what feels like a natural progression of power, to where you don't have your characters stuck in a just they don't have it. It seems like we haven't hit the ceiling of potential with Alchemancy and Furukami. Not Alchemancy, what am I saying? Allomancy and Furukami. It seems like we haven't hit that ceiling yet, and there's still a lot of room to grow and see just where we can push these powers to their absolute limits, and that's exciting. So yeah, all of these new it's not even so much new powers, it's just new applications of powers, and it's just really cool. And yeah, Sanderson did a great job with these new powers, and not new powers, sorry, these new ways to use these powers rather. And it made what I already thought was a really interesting and fun magic system even more interesting and even more fun. So I can't wait to read The Hero of Ages and see how Sanderson expands on it even more and creates even more incredible, fantastic decisions for these characters to go through to make Allomancy just that much more fun. It's such a joy to read these characters experimenting and playing with these powers and pushing themselves to the limits and finding new ways to do the same old things we've been given for now 2 books. It's really fun, and it's great. I love it. It's working within a limitation, and it breeding creativity, which is how a lot of creativity is born, is through working through limitation. So I love it. It's fantastic. But yeah, it's a really, really, really good book. I really can't recommend it enough. If you like The Final Empire, I think you will like The Well of Ascension. It's a great continuation point, and it also is, in my opinion, a great setup for The Hero of Ages, which I haven't started yet, but I'm really excited to start it soon. Yes, it does feel like a lot of the book is setting up for the climax that should come in The Hero of Ages, but that's okay, because that is something that middle books or middle films do have to deal with. It's just kind of an inevitable kind of thing that happens when having a trilogy. Your middle book is always going to be set up for the final, but it's still possible to make a self-contained story that does feel satisfying at its conclusion while still creating a good setup for the final act. And I do think that The Well of Ascension did that very well. And oh my god, those last 100 pages, if there's anything I agree with the reviews for people that the people that people wrote for this, it's definitely that those last 100 pages or so were just a wild ride. They were so much fun. Man, if there's one thing Brandon Sanderson knows how to write, it's a climax. My god, that man is so good at creating these really fun, entertaining action scenes that leap out at the page, that create these really vivid details that you just see it so clearly in your mind, and you're following the action really well. The pacing is fantastic, even when it's jumping between multiple perspectives. You always feel like you're in on the action at the current focal point of the action, and it's such a wild ride, man. I can't really explain it any other way. Like, it's just really well structured, really entertaining, very well written, and it's I've said this a lot already, but it really is just a lot of fun to read. If there's one thing that I can just really point at with Brandon Sanderson and say this is a great quality he has as a writer, it's creating these really fun and epic feeling climaxes where it feels like the culmination of the story has really hit this point, and all the characters are firing on all cylinders, and everything is coming to a head, and it's just such a very satisfying conclusion. So yeah, don't really know if I can say much more about this book, but I really loved it. I'm very quickly becoming a massive Brandon Sanderson fan. This was the third Sanderson book I've read, and my Sanderson shelf is growing more and more within each passing month. I'm not gonna try and count the books I have right now, but I have probably close to, if not over, 20 Brandon Sanderson books on my bookshelf right now. So I'm really excited to continue diving into this dude's catalog, especially specifically the Cosmere catalog. And yeah, I imagine I will have a review for the Well of Ascension. I'm sorry, I'm sure I will have a review for the Hero of Ages within the coming months. And I'm very excited to see where this trilogy ends, because I am so hooked. And The Final Empire was my favorite book I read in 2023. And I really do think that The Well of Ascension is going to be a hard book to beat for my favorite book of 2024. I think the only things that could possibly have a chance of beating that in my mind right now, in terms of what I have planned to read this year, is The Hero of Ages. If it ends up having that satisfying conclusion, that puts it above The Well of Ascension. So I'm really looking forward to it. Giving this book a 9 out of 10. It's very, very good. If you're into Brandon Sanderson, if you enjoyed The Final Empire, if you like really deep fantasy, high fantasy with complex magic systems, with in my opinion, deep and compelling characters, and definitely a bend towards more political maneuverings within that fantasy setting, but with a nice dose of action where it matters, I highly, highly recommend The Well of Ascension. So yeah, I think that will do it for me now. This has been another Sad Boys Book Review. My name's Dusty, and take care.